On Monday, we will go through another skill one. On Tuesday, we'll go through another skill one. And then probably Wednesday or Thursday, you'll have your first test over skill one. Last year's group wanted like a practice test before the test. So I'll probably do that with y'all again, or do that with y'all so that y'all can kind of feel what that first test is going to look like and feel the timing of it. But then you'll have your first test next week over skill one. So make sure that on here that you're taking good notes, because when we do a skill test, you'll be able to take out your skill one notes and all the things we've done for skill one to use as an example, right? So you have like the expectation of what we did, and you'll be able to use that on your test. So it should be a pretty easy test. Okay, so let's get into, we're looking at Bush. I forgot to put on here that this is skill number 1. So I'm going to put that on there. And I'm going to kind of walk you through like all the pieces and parts of this as we go. So at 8:30 p.m. on September 11th, 2001, President George W. Bush delivered an address to the nation regarding that morning's attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the hijacked airplane that crashed in rural Pennsylvania. Read the passage carefully, write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices Bush makes to convey his purpose of reaffirming the country's strength. So every time we have a prompt, we have what's called like a stable worded prompt, meaning like all of the prompts will look the same. So I'll tell you like the pieces and parts. So you will always have background information, and they'll give you any background information that is important for you to correctly interpret the passage. So if there is, and once we get kind of past the skills, I'll show you a variety of prompts so you can kind of see. If the prompt itself is longer, then you know there are more details in there that you need to know. For the English, for our English test, College Board doesn't expect you to know certain things in history. If it is a requirement for you to interpret the passage correctly, you should find it in the prompt. So I'll show you those things like once we get them to be like, ooh, this is a little golden nugget, like make sure you're paying attention. So we'll always have our background information. You will always have like your basic directions, right? So this is the part like you can kind of skip over, like read the passage carefully, duh, write an essay, duh, like those are your directions. And then our task is always at the end, and our task starts with a verb, right? So analyze, and we will always bracket our task because when we go to annotate, we will turn that task into a question to help us find things. So analyze the rhetorical choices Bush makes to convey his purpose of reaffirming the country's strength. So that is our task. Does anybody remember what I say is always going to be found in your task?
It's one of the things. I don't know.
What? It's one of the things. It is. What is one of the things? What is it that is always in the task? Purpose. Yep. And the purpose has 2 parts, and so it's always like one part of the purpose. So your purpose is always found in the task. We'll talk about that once we get there. Okay. So when you have like the skill 1 test, it will look exactly like this, right? I might make these a little bit smaller so that we have a little bit more room to write, but I'll still leave those questions in there for you, but you also have the questions that we wrote down yesterday on our notes that you'll have available for you as well, right? So remember, we're starting with author, speaker, and we kind of work our way through chronologically through the actual prompt itself. So what do you know about the individual? What experiences, credibility, bias, responsibilities, role, unique perspectives, all the things about this person. So we don't want to just generally say president because we already know that he's president, right? But let's look at president. And now turn to your partner. What are things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with Bush, but what are things that a president, like what does their role entail? What responsibilities do they have? Talk to your partner. You got like 30 seconds. Go. right. What are some things that a president, like what does their role entail? What are some of their responsibilities?
To represent the country.
Okay, to who?
To the people in the country and foreign.
Yep. Okay, so represents the country, like to the people, and to like foreign nations. Okay. That's good. What else?
They deal with domestic and like undomestic issues.
Undomestic?
Is that what you said?
Domestic and international?
International. Same.
Yeah.
Verbiage.
Same. Okay, so always deals with like domestic and international issues. Okay. What's the primary goal or responsibility of a president to his or her country?
To have the people feel safe.
Yep, to make them feel safe, to keep the country safe. Okay, so if we are ever given like a title of a person or a role of a person, like a mother, a counselor, a first lady, trying to think of other ones, we'll see, a poet, a professor, we always want to take that, and we may not know anything, usually we won't know anything about this specific person, but if we are given a role or a title, we want to try to look at like what do they do so that we can kind of, it will help us in our analysis. All right, now let's go back to 7th grade Texas history and talk to your partner. What do you know about George W. Bush? Ready, set, go. All right. Again, knowing history, or most of the time when we get a person for rhetorical analysis, we don't really know them much, which is fine. History nerds do well in here because like you have a little bit more context sometimes that you can add in, but it's not necessary in order to be like successful on this essay. So what do we know, if anything, about George Bush? Well, duh.
His father was president.
Okay, who said that? Where did that come from? Yep, okay, so sometimes we know, like people will know, I know there were 2 Bushes. I don't know which one this is. So this one is the son, so like father was president. But even if you don't know like which one it is, you can say that he came from like a political family. And I mean, not that he would know secrets from his father, right? Or when his father was in office, would he have like any kind of insight into like the things that were done in office? But he will understand the pressures of what is expected, right? Okay. Anything else that we know about Bush? Anytime we talk about politics, if you can, you want to talk about like what side of the aisle they're on. Do we know what he is? Not a Democrat. He's a Republican. If he's not a Democrat, he's a Republican. So Republican. The other thing that I like, and it doesn't always impact the message being given, but I think it's kind of relevant here. Where are they in their term is always really interesting, especially if we're talking about a president. So if we know we elect presidents every what? 4 years. So think, okay, 2024, we had an election, 2020, think back. See if you could figure out when was he elected, when did he take office, and why is that important? Turn to your partner. All right, so if we all did the math, when was he elected? 2000. When did he take office? January 2001, right? So elections are November, right? They take office the following January. So he was elected in 2000, November 2000. He took office in January 2001, which means where is he in his presidency? At the very beginning, like 9 months, right? 9 months in, barely. And when we think about it, when we go to analyze the passage, why is that important? Why do you think that would be important in this situation?
Because he has very little experience.
Yeah, he has very little experience, and he also doesn't necessarily have the trust of the people yet, right? The other thing that you don't really need to know, but like kind of plays into like how he addresses the people, is that like this was a very contentious election. When we voted back then, you know, now we touch like a touch screen and you can see like which one you choose, and then you get a printout of what you choose, and then you approve that before you turn it in, right? Then we had a sheet of like this paper, and it was on this like something that closed over it that you had this little like pen, but wasn't a marker. It was like a needle, kind of like, not aggressive like a needle, but you would poke through the paper and put by like your punch through whoever you voted for. So then those would physically have to be counted, right? So in this election, it was very tight. And so the Democrats called for a recount, and they had what was called like then like the dangling chads. So like they would recount, and there would be like little pieces of paper that were hanging. So it was like, did they really punch all the way through? Did they not punch all the way through? Did they really vote for him? Did they really not vote for him? So when he took office, it took another like month at least, I think, to figure out that like he like won. So when he took office in January, everybody's still kind of questioning like whether he should be there or not, right? All right, let's talk about audience. Remember, we go audience to the third power. So turn to your partner. Oh, one thing I want to tell you when we're writing on these documents, and anytime we're doing any kind of writing, honestly, I suggest not erasing things. I suggest not using whiteout if you mess up. If you write something down and I'm like, ooh, that's not like what we're looking for, I would say just mark through it with a single line, because what you want is when you're doing it on your own later, especially for a test grade, you don't want the perfection in front of you. You want to see like kind of what was wrong, so that you know that if you go to write that again on something else, you go, ooh, like that wasn't right for this reason. Like you can kind of see the thought process of working through it. All right. All right. So turn to your partner, see if you can think about descriptors for audiences, right? So initial audience, and then kind of like how far reaching was it? So turn to your partner. You got like a minute. Go. All right. Give me a couple. And remember, we want to think within, so when we think about rhetorical situation, we have to think within the situation itself, not past the situation, right? Like not days past. So we're thinking within this time frame. So what are some audiences that we can identify? Okay. What else?
Scare Americans.
Yep. we took good notes yesterday, we'd have some of these, right? Okay. Huh?
Grieving.
Yep. So, I think for this, like, if we're looking at describing Americans, that kind of hits everybody, right? Confused, scared, grieving, probably angry we could add in there. All right, so let's move beyond just like describing Americans. Who else would be audiences? I mean, first responders, what did we say? The country isn't watching, but who is? Foreign what? Foreign leaders, yep. So I would say foreign leaders. So I want to get a little bit more specific than just a foreign country, right? Like I want to look at like who's really paying attention, so it'd be the foreign leaders. And when we talk about foreign leaders and foreign countries, you have those that are for us and support us, and those that don't. So how would you label them?
Allies and what's the other one?
Yep. Enemies, yep. And I think you could say, I mean, I think that is a descriptor within itself, is like an ally, an American ally, or an American enemy. That would work. Who else, because it's televised, might be watching?
The people who did it.
Yeah. So I would say the terrorists. Now, I know I talk about like descriptors. So I don't feel like you really need a descriptor for a terrorist, like terrible terrorists. Like we don't really, like terrorist in itself is fine, right? Okay. I think those work. Like that covers like really the extent. We don't want to get in the weeds. That's first responders, I would say like kind of in the weeds, right? When we're talking like airplane pilots or executives, like I still think we're kind of getting in the weeds with that. So we want to be specific, but not like, you know, a teacher in New York. Like we don't want to be so specific. Okay, so that covers mostly of what we see, the wide range. And what I'm looking for when I look for audiences, I'm looking for beyond just the easy. So like that first level audience, I would say like this is kind of like that first level. It's the quick, easy level where we're really going to find some depth and value. And as a reader, I like, when I say reader, I mean like you're the person that scores your essays in the summer. Like as a reader, I like to see when kids go beyond just like the first initial response or like the easiest audience, right? Like that is impressive. All right, let's look at obstacles. So when we think of obstacles, think of him as a president in this situation. Like what obstacles is he going to have to overcome in order to get the audience that we've identified to hear his message? Go beyond the idea of like, oh, speaking in large, like nervous about speaking to a large group. Like that's y'all, not like a majority of the people that we are going to read about, right? So turn to your partner. What are some obstacles? Think about what we've identified so far. What are some obstacles that he's going to face in delivering his message? You got like a minute, go. All right, what do we think? What obstacles? That sounded very northern. What obstacles does he have to face?
Trust about his authority.
Yeah. So, and this is where sometimes like what we put down in like some boxes will kind of bleed over, right? So the idea that he's new to the presidency or new in his term, that leads into an obstacle is like the trust in his authority as a leader, right? Not only in his country, but to foreign leaders as well. What else? What else?
Emotions,
Specific.
like anger, surprise.
Whose emotions?
President's emotions.
Okay, So he's going to have to, like, one of his own obstacles is his own emotions, right? Why is that an obstacle when he's getting ready to speak?
You know, be like composed, like calm, all that.
Yeah, so as a president, he has to be presidential, right? So, like, I would say he has to maintain this balance in this situation of being empathetic and not being like heartless, right? Where he's very like stoic. But then also once we kind of get past the grief or the shock and the awe and the grief, what comes next? Anger, right? Like those are all emotions, but like anger comes next, right? Grief, shock, and then let's get him, right? Like revenge. So he has to balance this idea of like being empathetic with the idea of a need for revenge. Because that isn't really presidential. Yep.
Can we add to that list of like staying humble and not cocky?
Yeah. So he has to have the idea of being humble, especially in this, like, and I would say there's nothing to be cocky about in this situation, but there is the opposite of cocky, which is what he can't be in this situation, is he can't show what? Weakness. Yeah. So that's like, there's nothing to be cocky about, but when he's not being cocky, he also cannot be weak. Okay. Those are good. All right, now look at like what can he leverage? Sometimes like the opposite of one side can go to the other, right? So if you identify some things in one, see if there are any opposites to it that you can use for the other side. So talk to your partner. What can he leverage in his favor in order to gain the understanding that he wants to give the American people? So what can he leverage? Turn and talk to your partner. All right. What can we leverage? What can he leverage, not we?
He could reassure like everyone that's like upset or angry.
But what is he leveraging? That's what he's doing, not necessarily what he leverages.
He's gonna go get him. He's gonna go, raise them. He's gonna bomb them. Whatever he's gonna do.
Okay, so that action is like he's going to leverage like a plan, right? Okay, so he can leverage like a plan of action. And in order to do that, like you said, bomb everybody, what is he leveraging? Who's doing that?
The military.
Yeah. So he can leverage like the strength of our military. Okay. What else can he leverage?
You can say like the strength of the American people and how they're gonna, bounce back.
Well, that's his purpose. So he's got to get them to understand that first. So he can't necessarily leverage it, right? Because he's first got to get them to understand it, right? I mean, we're 12 hours past. So we are like shut down at home. Everything is shut down, right? Like public transportation is shut down in all forms. Planes, buses, subways, taxis, everything is shut down, right? When it happened, they started shutting down cell towers. because they weren't sure why things were happening. So they shut down cell towers. People weren't even able to get out of New York. You see like video of like people walking across the Brooklyn Bridge just to get out of the city, right? So everything is shut down at this point. So nobody is confident in what we're going to do moving forward because we're only like 12 hours past it. What else can he leverage?
This might be more something that he does, but he can leverage like more calmness. So like if he shows that he's more like under control, then maybe he can like leverage for the people to also feel more calm.
Okay, so he can leverage like his own. Okay, so question in there. So how is he able to have like that calmness? Like what is giving him the ability to like stay calm and stay on a path? What is it that he has that he can leverage that allows him to do that?
Charisma?
He had very little of that. I mean, authority, I mean, he can leverage his like role as a world leader. And I mean, I would say like as a world like superpower, right? Okay. But when I'm trying to get us to like a certain idea. So he can leverage the idea of a plan of action because what does he have in front of him that nobody else does? News?
Nukes.
No. That's military. What allows him to have a plan of action 12 hours later? Huh?
His people.
What does communication lead to?
News.
No. What gives him the ability to have a plan? You just don't start making up a plan. 12 hours later, what allows him to have a plan?
His team.
What does his team have?
Information.
Okay. Y'all are going to get tired of me going, but what? But why? But how? Until we get there. So it is like he's going to leverage like all the details and information that he has. So do you see how like, especially in this situation, he has to have all those details in order to create a plan. He has to have all those details in order to go in front of people with this calmness because he knows kind of what has happened and at least to the best of his ability at that point, right? All right, let's look at exigence. What did I said we have to be very careful of when we do exigence? Not to what? Oversimplify. So let's look first at the simplified version of exigence. The very basic, easy first response of why is he doing this now is what? Yeah, the tax that morning. Now, the more the more advanced version of exigence, and it's not always the case, but in this case, like we have very specific information in this prompt that goes to the answer of, we know the part of like, when we ask exigence, we say, why this person at this time on this issue? So we know why this person. But why at this time? And why for this issue? So see if you can find that in the prompt itself. Turn to your partner and see if you can figure it out.
The morning detects the World Trade Center.
Bro, I
Look at it. I can't say it's
rule it.
Like it's like a have like a you said.
Like it like is kind
You said rural.
All right.
Rural.
What is in the prompt that is helping us get to a more advanced exigence? What's in the prompt? Why this person? Why this time? Why this topic?
That morning's attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the hijacked airplane.
Okay, so that's the morning's attacks. So that's what happened, but why this time?
It gives people a couple hours to think on what's happening and gives them the time to set the speech.
Part of that is right.
Reaffirming the country's strength.
Nope, that's purpose. So we're kind of getting there. So like the two, like our two answers. So the morning is when it happened.
He like confirmed. He gets like confirmation that the people who did it did it.
I mean, close to it, right? So when we're looking at, like, we want to look for like little, like I called them like golden nuggets in a prompt, right? So one of the things that when I wrote the prompt, like I did it specifically, I gave the time of his address. We usually don't have time stuff in our prompts, so when we do, you go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then also like the morning's events. So those two things tell you very specifically. More advanced. So he doesn't necessarily maybe know exactly who did it, but what does he have between the morning and 12 hours later? What does he have?
12 hours later, means time.
more information.
More information. So he has like gathered more details. And knows like more of like the who and the why. What else has he also been able to do in those 12 hours? That is part of his role.
Set the speech.
No.
Make a plan.
Okay, that goes into the facts and information. But why can't he get on at 1 o'clock and say, okay, we're good. Here's what I know. One, he doesn't have all the information, but
Yes, process it.
but why?
Or if he didn't know, doesn't need more time.
Okay, so what has he already ensured 12 hours later to the best of like our ability is that we are what? Okay, yeah, that we're safe. Okay, so 12 hour, so more of the exigence is like that he's ensured that like we are safe and like no more attacks will happen. And not necessarily, I would say, like they won't happen, but we are more prepared for like to defend ourselves, right? So those are just like little things that we look at. And sometimes it'll be that specific and sometimes it won't. Context, I got to build a little bit. So I don't know how much y'all know about early 2000s, but so like when we think about context, remember we want to think like historically, politically, socially, economically, environmentally. So like we're economically like strong. We are always in some kind of war. We haven't started this one first, but we're getting ready to. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hey, warm cookies. Y'all want some? No, I'm just kidding. My kid would kill me. Okay, so we're economically strong. It isn't always the case, but like we're starting with like technology advancements. That's not always like important, but I think here it is. We're also looking at like cable news.
Radio.
I mean, we always have radio, but like cable news is spread. So like we've gotten from like just our key like, you know, core 4 channels to now like cable news networks, and cable networks are starting to get bigger during this time. And why is that important in this situation?
Just more information.
Yeah, more information. Like every channel we have is covering video and interviews of the day. So the other thing that I like to point out is that this is all pre-TSA. So we could just walk willy-nilly through the airport. Grandma could take us to the terminal. We could take any kind of liquids on the plane. There were no regulations for the size of our carry-on besides they just had to fit. We could put all kinds of liquids in there. We could smoke going through the airport. I mean, I didn't, but we could. You could smoke on a plane. So like none of those regulations came until like after 9/11, right? All right, let's look at purpose. The purpose is always found where? In the task. Put your finger on the purpose. It's going to be one of the things that we, in the brackets, right? What is the purpose?
To reaffirm the country's strength.
Yep, reaffirm the country's strength. So that is our purpose. Now, what we have to understand now is we have to understand, is it the understand or the do? So remember, we have two parts. One we do before, one we get after. Remember, the understand goes along with the think, feel, or believe, and the do is going to be an action. So which one is it that we have? Understand or do?
I'd say understand.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from the verb itself, right? Like understand is to like reaffirm the country's strength. That's how we have to feel. That's what we have to believe. So when we write this down, I need it word for word. So reaffirm the country's strength. This part we get after we read.